You see a 5-0 preseason win and assume light work. But for an hour, Rosenborg played United close through an interesting tactical approach that forced Carrick and United to constantly problem solve, especially in situations like this. And Carrick himself had a bold and clear tactical approach, in and out of possession. So let's take a look at these tactics. Quick reminder, it is pre-season, so we don't care about the scoreline, but are instead examining the elements of the system that may or may not be carried over into the season proper. And we'll begin with United's in-possession elements. When they had the ball, both from goal kicks and in deep areas generally, United were looking to build short as much as humanly possible. Rosenborg, however, did not come to roll over, and were looking to press extremely high with a unique shape. Sasa, the left winger, would push right up alongside the centre forward, so they could immediately put Maguire and Heaven under intense pressure, while Pereira at left back kept a close eye on Mbeumo's movements. The Norwegians may have felt comfortable with this shape because it was Yoro at right back, who posed little threat of receiving and driving up the pitch. But still, their left-sided central midfielder would take up this role, so that if the ball did go out to Yoro, he was under immediate pressure, cutting off his passing options. And how Carrick used his Santos Mount double pivot in response to this was key. To help that game plan of looking to build up short, both would drop extremely deep to provide passing options. But again, Rosenborg were aggressive in the press and looked to commit both of their pivots to United's, with their centre-back backing this up, pushing up onto the 10. This extreme pressure in the United build-up third meant that Santos and Mount actually couldn't get on the ball much during the build-up phase, leading to situations like this. That is a small line, however, because these scenarios were actually the exception, and what United did brilliantly was consistently use movement to help break the press. The front three would look to pin the defense deep, and crucially, they were always looking to break the last line with runs in behind, so Rosenborg couldn't afford to commit their centre-back to pressing the 10. So the likes of Lacey could receive passes between the lines because acres of space were consistently created there. Or even more effectively, Xerxes would look to drop in, while Lacey made the opposing movement into any room that was created. The one thing with this configuration is that because both Mount and Santos were tied up in the build-up, the onus was on the centre-back to produce these line-breaking passes. So if this is an approach that Carrick plans to use going forward, the ball-playing ability of the centre-backs will be crucial. So how effective was all of this? Well, in the 31st minute, Rosenborg are in their usual Vice-like press, Pereira high on Mbeumo, the winger pressing centrally on Maguire, and the left central midfielder ready to press Yoro, while their pivots are backing all of this up. But because their centre forward does not effectively cut off the lateral pass, Heaven now has space to get his head up, and we see that Xerxes has dropped into the space between the lines, while the movement from Dorku means that the centre-back cannot commit, allowing Xerxes to turn. And again, we see that opposing movement with Lacey, as the key is to always have runners in behind. So now Xerxes has two options, and he picks the right one, leading to the opening goal. When United were able to get into more settled possession high up the pitch, the way Carrick set up the team was interesting, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. He continued to use opposing fullbacks, as Yoro was effectively a third centre-back, while Shaw was high on the left providing all of the width, which allowed Dorgu to tuck in. And look at the difference in the structures it provided United in possession. Down the left, they always had good connectivity, and in a usual system with dual 10s for example, the same would be happening down the right. But Lacey actually tended to remain central. And this isn't bad by any means, but it did mean that Mbeumo found himself isolated when he received the ball. And this is a great scenario when it is a proper dribble-heavy winger, for example Ahmad, receiving the ball, as they are likely to beat their man. But while Mbeumo was industrious, dribbling is not the standout feature of his game. In fact, the major structural change that Carrick implemented in the second half was having Lacey drift right much earlier, which created these easy 2v1s, making them so much more dangerous, especially when the winger was pressing centrally and the midfielder was drawn higher, to Yoro. The other major shift as the match wore on was one word: fluidity. These three in particular tended to rotate position, making them much tougher to track, especially as Rosenborg were pressing so aggressively, while fluidity for Dorgu translated to freedom, as with Shaw wide, he drifted across the pitch constantly hunting for space between the lines, again, especially when the Rosenborg pivots were pressing high, as that's where the room was. But where United again initially struggled before adapting was in the defensive phase. When United were in their settled defensive phase, it was a compact 4-4-2, but higher up they initially stuck to their 4-2-3-1, with Lacey or Xerxes trying to cut off the pivot. And Mbeumo's role in the defense was the most interesting and the most important. Pereira pushed high, with Sasa from the wing drifting infield, and where usually it would be simple enough for defending teams to effectively go man-to-man out wide like this, that is not what happened. Instead, Mbeumo looked to mark the passing lane, looking to cut off the option into the inverting winger. Now, there may have been a few possible reasons for this. Firstly, if Xerxes successfully cut off the infield options, it meant there was only one pass available. So that pass could become the press trap for United to ramp up the pressure out wide as soon as Pereira received. The other reason was this: Rosenborg, whenever in possession, looked to use massive overloads through the center. So Mbeumo, staying more centrally, allowed them to have an extra defensive body here, meaning harder access into that central overload. But there were two massive issues with this. Firstly, passing lane-oriented defending works best when the man on the ball doesn't effectively have unlimited time, as all of this time means that the man in the cover shadow has time to escape without the defender noticing. And this happened time and time again, as with Yaro having to keep one eye on the man out wide, this pass became much more possible. And it wasn't just that pass that was open. The right side was Mason Mount's side, and with these central overloads plus the time on the ball, Rosenborg consistently looked to get men between the lines, particularly around Mount, both in this high 4-2-3-1 as well as the 4-4-2. So if Carrick intends to use Mount here, this defensive awareness has to be addressed, as better sides will take advantage of the space. So that initial pressing shape had to change, and Lacey was the key. Xerxes still performed a similar role of directing the play down Rosenborg's left, but Lacey now looked to keep the pivot in his cover shadow while pressuring the centre-back, making it much more difficult to play these intricate passes here or into the centre, which was a great adaptation. Just before moving on to final thoughts, preseason is the perfect time to level up your tactical knowledge, and to help you do this, I've created Football Fundamentals, which is my free program designed to teach you the building blocks of tactical analysis from the ground up over the course of a month. It's completely free, and you can sign up through the link in the description below. A solid showing from United in a match where their opponents actually posed some interesting questions. But what did you think of their performance, and do you see these principles being carried over into the season proper? Drop it down below. Carrick is the latest United manager, but if you want to dive deep into the tactics of every United manager post Sir Alex Ferguson, check out this video by clicking on screen now.